Story 1. I had the realization that when I smoked, which was daily, I was sitting on the couch watching my life pass me by. The real kicker? When high, I was perfectly fine with that. Story 2. After years of smoking, I realized I didn't even like it anymore. It made me feel bad and made me lazy. And, as I've seen others say, the worst part is it makes you feel fine with sitting there doing nothing with your time while your life is just passing you by. Story 3. I work a tech job, and we recently had an all-staff quarterly meeting. Some of my colleagues in the meeting were so well-spoken and sounded so smart that I felt I was falling behind in life because my daily weed smoking wasn't helping me grow. I felt that others around me were excelling, and I was stuck in the mud, feeling groggy every day. Story 4. It made me very paranoid and antisocial. I noticed after I stopped that my friends who did not stop were all paranoid and antisocial to some degree, so I do not regret it. I do think some people seem to be less affected by it than others, but it affects everyone to some degree. Story 5. It gives my wife psychotic episodes with her bipolar disorder, so the last time it happened I told her that when she got out of the hospital I'd no longer grow it, use it myself, or have it anywhere in the house so that she wasn't tempted to try it again. So I haven't. To be honest, I'd love a joint, but it's just not worth risking. Her thinking that next time will be different for her and trying it again, and she did like getting high in the stages before psychosis took over, so if she saw me doing something she can no longer do, I'd feel I was rubbing her nose in it a bit. Story 6. Cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. Ended up in the emergency room, almost had kidney failure due to dehydration and the constant, unstoppable vomiting that doesn't stop until you quit. Story 7. The good. Weed was a turning point for me because it forced me to finally address some deeply buried thoughts. Questions like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? And why do I feel so worthless sometimes? This honest self-reflection led me to switch majors and take on challenges I'd never have tackled otherwise, all of which ended up shaping me into a more focused and driven person. In many ways, weed gave me the clarity I needed to figure out my real passions and commit to them. The bad. At the same time, getting high felt so incredible that almost everything else started to lose its appeal. When I was high, life was fascinating. I felt like I could delve deeper into any topic, figure out solutions to every problem, and just see the world in a richer, more vibrant way. But once the high wore off, I felt empty and dull, like a blank shell of myself. I started believing that the only time the world had any color was when I was high. My social anxiety also got worse. I'd stay in my room to avoid feeling self-conscious, even though I knew I needed to get out more. When it got rough, I was an engineering student with big dreams, yet I found myself cutting my study time short just to chase that high, directly clashing with my goal of excelling in my field. I also needed to work on projects, prepare for interviews, and start applying for jobs. But it was during COVID-19, and being at home all day made it way too easy to give in to temptation, right when this was arguably one of the most crucial periods for a university student. Everything I'd worked so hard for led up to this moment, and it was heartbreaking to realize that the same substance that once gave me clarity was now sabotaging my ambitions. Recognizing addiction. I knew things were spiraling when I couldn't stop, even as I promised myself every night would be the last time. I'd get as high as possible, telling myself tomorrow I'd quit for good. Then I'd just fall into the same cycle again. Quitting for good. After about 6 years of on and off use, I finally quit around 4 years ago. It was hands down one of the hardest things I've ever done. At this point, I don't plan on going back because I doubt I'd have the willpower to quit again, especially now that I've achieved many of the goals we'd originally helped me discover. Story 8. I was smoking an ounce every 2 to 3 days. It was affecting every part of my life for over 24 years. I started when I was 12 and really didn't know any different. I wasn't even getting that high. I was just maintaining a normal feeling of blah. I'd only get high the first time I would smoke for the day, and I only smoked blunts, which are game cigarillos, so the nicotine was another vice I had to kick at the same time. Around 14 blunts a day while smoking roaches broken in with the weed as well. I tried to conserve bud that way, but then I noticed I was angry all the time when I wasn't smoking, like at work. It was just a bad time. It's been about a year and a half and I feel great, and a lot of good things have happened in that time. It was hard to kick both habits at once, though. I tried smoking once about 6 months into sobriety, and I was so high I absolutely hated it. So here I am now. Story 9. Smoked from high school in the 1990s up until about 2010, sometimes daily and sometimes every other day. Always had a hard time applying myself and was always in this nostalgic, dreamlike state of mind with bouts of panic attacks from time to time. When I quit, I realized that I had been sabotaging my own work and life potential by avoiding truths and staying numb for over a decade. As soon as I quit, I started excelling at my profession and went from hourly to a really good salary. Got married, started a family, and now I'm present for my wife and kids. I've smoked a couple of times in the past nearly 15 years catching up with friends. A puff here or there, but I'm too conscientious of what's at stake and my tolerance as a husband and a father to embrace the lifestyle. Some people need it and some people can use it without it affecting them as it affects me. Everyone is different and I respect that. However, for me, to be present, feel raw emotion, and show up for my own life, smoking or eating edibles was not conducive to my personal and professional success. So I stopped. Maybe one day when the kids are gone, I'll have a small stash for social gatherings or an evening unwinding ritual. But for the moment, I'm sober and active in my own reality. Much more rewarding to me to be present and to be self-aware as it feels good to feel things on a level playing field. Story 10. Everywhere I went, it was always the perfect place to get high. Watching a movie, get high. Going to a restaurant, get high. Going to a theme park, get high. I went on a friend's holiday to Portugal. 2 of our friends are from there, and their parents were on holiday, so we had their house for 2 weeks. I spent half of the first day trying to pick up my Portuguese friends who don't even smoke trying to link some for me. Then it dawned on me. I was with all my closest friends. The weather was perfect with clear blue skies, and we were a 15-minute walk from a beautiful beach. I didn't get any weed and just enjoyed the place and the good company. Quitting is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I smoked every day, and while it isn't physically addictive, I was definitely addicted to it. Probably the biggest thing was actually having dreams again and realizing that while I was smoking regularly, I actually didn't have dreams when I was sleeping. I have much more money now, and I go out and do stuff instead of just staying home and getting high. I almost didn't do the holiday, but luckily I've got good friends who encouraged me to go. Best thing I ever did. I don't miss it anymore. Story 11. When I was young, it was fun. When you get older, it only makes your brain focus on negative and stressful things in your life. It's just not enjoyable anymore. Story 12. My brother started smoking, and it sent him into a deep psychosis he's still in after a few years. It triggered his schizophrenia. I was a heavy user for a few years, and it didn't do me any good anymore. I used it as a crutch and self-medicated with it. Anyway, after hearing the story of what he was experiencing in his psychotic episode, it was bone-chilling. I officially quit the day after and haven't smoked since. It's been about a year and a half. Story 13. Smoked for 20 years. Wanted to buy a house but was spending $100 a week on weed, which seemed a waste to me. I have an all-or-nothing mindset, so I didn't have the capability to just stop smoking as much. Quit about 2 years ago and bought a house. An extra $400 a month goes a long way, friends. Story 14. I liked the way alcohol made me feel like a real person with emotions, but I obviously couldn't be drunk a lot. A friend suggested marijuana, so I smoked a bit. However, every time I got high, I was in an extreme fight-or-flight response. I wanted to crawl up into the smallest, darkest space possible. It was not fun. I felt like I was being hunted. Story 15. I've smoked weed more or less every day for 16 years, and I've only recently started to realize it's kind of making me a bit of an anxious bum. I haven't given up, but I probably should. Story 16. Used to smoke every day, which made me a bit paranoid, anxious, and antisocial, but I was totally fine with that as I was stoned constantly. This went on for about 13 years or so. Then I decided to go back to school at 28 and quickly realized I couldn't function or learn properly. So I started smoking only once a week on a Friday evening. The problem was that having not smoked all week, I'd get way too stoned with just one joint, and it made me really paranoid and anxious to the point I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't even lie down and close my eyes. I'd be so stoned, my mind would be flying along while also trying to relax, basically pulling in two different directions, and my heart would be going a million miles per hour. That's the opposite of how you want to feel when you smoke weed. So I quit. It's been 15 years now since I last smoked weed, and 11 years without a cigarette. Story 17. Anxiety and overthinking. Better sleep, better brain functioning, and money. Having and remembering dreams. Dealing with problems a lot better. Story 18. I just had no real life, a lazy mindset, and it made me very antisocial. I would go home from work, get stoned, and lock myself in, and weekends were the same. The change of mindset after stopping is so much better. Now I'm out hiking and camping, etc., and living a more fulfilling life. Story 19. I had convinced myself it was helping my anxiety, but then it started to make it so much worse, to the point where I would panic every time. It wasn't a problem when I was in my teens, but once I got into my 20s, it was like my body decided it was time to stop. Story 20. Had a very massive panic attack after smoking and decided I never want to do that again. You know that feeling when your breathing goes on manual and you have to consciously take breaths? I had that, but with my heartbeat. I had to consciously focus on keeping my heart beating or it would stop. And it scared me. Never again. Story 21. It made my anxiety issues way worse. I thought I was self-medicating, but no, it was amplifying the nonsense. Now, I understand that there are strains out there that can help, but here in Ireland, we don't have the same access to variety that other places do. Story 22. Smoked daily for over 10 years. Reached a point I realized it really didn't add anything to my life. Whenever I was high, I literally did nothing but sit and watch television when I could be doing something constructive. I hit 30 and decided to quit. My friends were shocked and were in awe of my will to quit. They thought I'd backtrack after a few weeks, but it's been 2 years now. Story 23. Anxiety, cognitive impairment, depression symptoms, lack of confidence, lung issues, constant cough, and stuffy nose. The list can go on, but these are the main ones. Story 24. My partner got pregnant, and I decided I didn't want to get caught and spend any of my child's life in jail. It's still illegal in my country. 21 years ago, I still miss it, but seeing my child grow up was so worth it. Story 25. Potheads ruined weed. Used to be that I could smoke a joint, have fun, laugh, and do things. Nowadays, you take a toke, raid the fridge and pantry, then pass out in bed. Where's the fun in that? The hybrids that have been around are just way too strong. Story 26. Motivation. It was hard to admit it killed my drive to do anything. Since I quit, I picked up paddleboarding and weightlifting, became more social, and started eating better. I am in the best shape of my life at 40. I am not anti-weed. It is just an all-or-nothing thing for me, and it is not a healthy choice for me in the end. Story 27. I'm sure this is an unpopular opinion, but it was a gateway for me personally to hard drugs. Call me a drug abuse resistance education poster kid, but it's true. I started smoking when I was 13 and became a daily smoker by 16. I started experimenting with other drugs such as lysergic acid diethylamide, mushrooms, cocaine, and more, and started chasing that sleepy feeling marijuana gave me. I became a full-fledged opioid addict by 18. I got sober at 21. Took 4 trips to rehab, but I'm doing the right thing. I love being sober. It gets hard sometimes as most of my friends are daily smokers, but for the most part, it really doesn't bother me to say no. Story 28. I don't have definitive proof of this, but I believe it started affecting my heart. I was a daily smoker for years. I smoked every day after work and all afternoon and evening on the weekends. I felt like it helped lower my stress levels and helped me relax after a rough day. In the summer of 2023, I started having frequent heart palpitations. I didn't think much of it because I've always had heart palpitations. But this time it was happening every day, multiple times a day. I started feeling extreme discomfort in my neck and shoulders while walking my dog. I felt like my heart was racing. I ignored it because I was uninsured. A few days later, while building with my son, I suddenly felt like my heart was racing. I couldn't breathe normally. I felt like I was going to pass out. I took my heart rate and it was insanely high. I ended up going to the emergency room, and after waiting for hours and getting my blood tested, they determined my troponin levels were high enough to indicate some kind of issue with my heart, but not enough evidence to suggest a full-on heart attack. I stayed overnight for observation. It was really scary, and I couldn't quit cold turkey. I weaned myself off. I don't smoke daily anymore, just once in a while when I have the house to myself, so maybe once every few months. I get maybe a weak joint and just take a few hits. I do feel a lot better. I don't get palpitations anymore. I haven't had another issue with my heart. More than anything, it made me realize how much I was smoking and how much more harm than good it was doing. Story 29. Paranoia and anxiety got worse, way worse. I was okay with not doing anything. My day revolved around getting done with my work and smoking. A lot of my friends revolved around that too. My sleep quality was not that great either. I also got into working out full-time and realized I could not manage my diet because smoking would make me feel extreme hunger cues that otherwise would not have been there. I would skip working out a lot to smoke. I do not know, I just felt like I had to choose between a fulfilled life and getting high. That is just a personal anecdote, though.